441 Attitude Problem. After Su Ling finished speaking, she went forward to push Yu Yin away, and the two of them started fighting again. The men hurriedly stopped the fight. Unfortunately, the women's combat strength was astonishing at this moment. Not only did they fail to stop them, but they were also accidentally injured. Because the previous argument had happened in the corridor and it was time to wash up, many people who heard the commotion ran over to watch the commotion, including Yan Yin. Although he didn't witness the entire process, he found out about the cause and effect of the matter from the discussions of the people beside him. His face flushed with embarrassment, and he secretly resented Yu Yin for implicating him. He didn't want to see the aftermath, so he left. When Yu Bing was called to the dormitory by Qian Hao, she saw Yu Yin and Su Ling fighting. She frowned and shouted, "What are you guys trying to do? Are you trying to cause trouble? Stop!" Yu Bing's voice was completely ignored. Although Yu Bing really wanted to see Yu Yin continue to be beaten down, as the captain of the intellectual team, she had to mediate. Yu Bing said in a cold voice, "All right, continue fighting. I'll give you both a serious demerit on your files later." As soon as she said this, Yu Yin and Su Ling gradually paused. After Yu Bing gave the man beside her a look, everyone went forward again and finally stopped the two of them this time. Yu Bing waited for the situation to be under control before asking, "Can someone tell me what happened?" Qian Hao thought that Yu Bing had come because of him, so he hurriedly went forward and told her what had happened. His description was very objective. As soon as Qian Hao finished speaking, Su Ling immediately said righteously, "Miss Yu, I just can't stand Yu Yin lying, so I want to seek justice for these young men who lent Yu Yin money." When Yu Yin heard this, she immediately pointed at Su Ling and said, "Don't lie, you can't stand me, so you're just using my parents' matter to cause trouble. You're treating the others as pawns. Your motives are evil." When Su Ling heard this, she smiled as if she had seen through Yu Yin. "Yu Yin, don't try to change the topic. Captain Yu Yin borrowed money from the intellectual team and didn't return it. You have to uphold justice for all these young men." When Su Ling said this, she pulled Yu Bing to her side. "Yes, this is an internal conflict among intellectuals, so Captain Yu is the perfect person to handle it. I don't think this matter should be escalated to an internal conflict. What if Yu Yan's parents are really on a business trip and they might send her money later? Aren't we being too aggressive now? Don't focus on the business trip for now. Whether or not she has the ability to pay back the money is the key. If she has the ability to pay back a portion but refuses to, things will be different." "That's right. If she really can't take out any money, we won't force her. As I said just now, it's not impossible for us to accept a repayment plan. The key is her attitude." The people who were borrowing money started discussing. When these words entered Yu Yan's ears, she looked at Yu Bing nervously. Now that this matter had reached Yu Bing, Yu Yin had already lost the chance to deal with it herself. Seeing this, Su Ling looked at Yu Yin gloatingly. She was very sure that she had seen stamps in Yu Yan's hands before. Previously, Yu Bing had asked Feng Kai to deliberately release the news because she wanted these creditors to pester Yu Yin and find her something to do. Now, everything was going according to her expectations. Yu Bing smiled at Yu Yin meaningfully. She avoided the rumors and only mentioned the debt problem. "Yu Yin, it's only right to repay a debt. You saw everyone's attitude. I suggest you show some sincerity. They're all intellectuals from the city, and they're not unreasonable people. If you have money, you should pay. If you don't have money, you have to find a solution." Yu Bing didn't say it explicitly, but everyone knew the so-called sincerity was none other than the stamps Su Ling mentioned. Seeing this, Su Ling echoed, "That's right. It's not easy for everyone to pool their money and lend it to you. You can't keep sending them away by saying that you don't have money since your parents are on a business trip, right? Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." For 42 pretending to be a good person. Hearing Su Ling's words, Yu Yin didn't dare to speak anymore. Otherwise, they would really think that she was trying to go back on her words. Su Ling still felt that it wasn't enough and continued to add fuel to the fire. She deliberately asked, "Yu Yin, why aren't you speaking? Does this mean you really plan to go back on your words?" Yu Yin glared at Su Ling with red eyes. "Su Ling, you usually like to form cliques and ostracize other intellectuals. When I give you good things, you curry favor with me. When I don't give you any benefits, you immediately take the lead to ostracize me. You're pretending to be a good person in front of everyone now. In the end, you just want to use other people to bully me. It's fine if you take my things and eat my food, but now that my parents can't send me money in time, you're spreading rumors and inciting everyone to hit me when I'm down. Su Ling, you're an ungrateful person. It's better for me to feed dogs than feed you." Everyone knew that Su Ling liked to form cliques, but it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, so if the matter didn't involve them, no one would say anything. Now that Su Ling's tendency to form cliques and Su Ling's ungrateful behavior was exposed by Yu Yan in public, the onlookers didn't say anything on the surface, but they looked at Su Ling with disdain. After Yu Yan finished speaking, she looked at the people who had lent her money and said angrily, "How many of you have eaten my food before? I'm just a little late, but you guys keep urging me. Did I refuse to return the money?" Yu Yan didn't have to worry about food and clothing in the past, so she was indeed quite lavish. Of course, she did this mainly to enjoy everyone's envious gazes, but no matter what, she did give a lot of food to most intellectuals. Therefore, when everyone heard Yu Yan's words, they felt a little embarrassed. After all, they had received things from her. When Su Ling saw that Yu Yan had ruined her reputation, she naturally couldn't let the matter rest. She was a little angry after being exposed, so she shouted, "Yu Yan, don't slander me." Yu Yan had exposed her, so Su Ling had to return the favor. Since Yu Yan ruined her reputation, she had to suffer as well. Su Ling criticized her again. "Don't you yourself know best why you gave everyone food? It was only after Mr. Wu took the village chief position that you had no choice but to go to the field yourself. Before this, you didn't work that much. You paid people to clean up the dormitory and work in the field. As for the food that you occasionally shared with everyone, it's just hush money. Don't be such a hypocrite." Yu Bing's eyes lit up. Just as she was wondering where the breakthrough point was, Su Ling took the initiative to mention it. Su Ling exposed Yu Yan's dirty laundry once again, making Yu Yan so angry that she picked up the broom and hit Su Ling. After dodging the attack, Su Ling wanted to hit her back. Seeing this, Yu Bing couldn't ignore it anymore and shouted with a frown, "Hurry up and separate the two of them. How can you guys fight in public?" The boys separated the two of them, preventing another fight from breaking out. Yu Bing looked at the two people who were bickering and said in derision, "Didn't you guys claim to be cultured city dwellers?" Seeing that no one was speaking, Yu Bing paused for a moment before continuing, "I already understand the situation. Since the two of you failed to reach a peaceful settlement, I can't hide or ignore this incident. Yu Yan, objectively speaking, since your actions back then were done with ulterior motives, there's no need to use them to ask for favors now." Yu Yan had deliberately argued with Su Ling to divert everyone's attention just now, but Yu Bing directly exposed that she had ulterior motives. Yu Yan thought of her incompatible relationship with Yu Bing and knew that she couldn't let her continue, so she interrupted Yu Bing. "Yu Bing, everyone knows that our relationship is not good. I have reason to suspect that you're using your position to take revenge and slander me. I know that I owe everyone money, but I've never denied it. I'm already here. Are you guys afraid that I'll run away or something?" When the debt collectors heard this, their expressions softened. Now that the matter had blown up, everyone knew that Yu Yan had borrowed their money, so they were not afraid that she would go back on her word. In this place where they had to have permission even when they went out of town, Yu Yan couldn't escape even if she wanted to. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 443 implicated. When Su Ling heard this, she said, "So what even if you're here? Give everyone their money back. You just want to stall for time." When Yu Yan saw Su Ling try her best to ruin her reputation, she was angry and anxious. Yu Bing clenched her fists and placed them under her nose to hide her smile. She coughed lightly and continued, "Yu Yan, everyone else will naturally judge if I'm using my position to take revenge or not. This matter was caused by you borrowing money. I appeared because you couldn't resolve it and caused an even bigger conflict. This has already affected the harmony of the intellectuals, so I had no choice but to step in." Some of the people watching the commotion were on good terms with Su Ling, so when they heard Yu Bing's words, they found a way to deal Yu Yan a blow. They immediately mocked, "Captain Yu has a lot of things to do, but now, she has to clean up your mess. It's fine if you're not grateful, but you criticize everyone you see. How despicable." Yu Bing didn't give Yu Yan a chance to interrupt this time. "I have a lot of things to do, so let's end it quickly. Yu Yan, since everyone is suspicious of your ability to repay the debt and you really can't fork out the money now, why don't you show some sincerity first? As for what this gesture of sincerity is, it's up to you. You can't just let them wait forever, right?" Yu Bing didn't explain clearly, but she brought the topic back to the main point again. When Sun was in a hurry to ask for money, so he immediately said, "Yu Yan, open it and let us see if you have stamps. This is the greatest gesture of sincerity." "That's right. If you don't have any, everyone will know that it's useless to force you. Then, we can sit down and talk about other ways." "That's right. You said that you don't have money, but Su Ling saw the stamps in your hand. In that case, prove it. I think there are stamps in this cabinet. Su Ling must have seen them. Think about it, the two of them are roommates in the same dormitory, so how can Yu Yan hide them?" "I think so too. Yu Yan keeps changing the topic. Isn't this a sign that she's trying to hide things?" At this point, if she really doesn't have money, she can just be frank about it. Their attention was pulled back to the main topic. Everyone was discussing, but the main goal was to let Yu Yan open the cabinet to prove her innocence. Yu Yan had left the cabinet because she wanted to hit Su Ling. When Su Ling saw the empty spot, she gave a look to the people she was on good terms with in the crowd. 3 girls slowly moved towards Yu Yan. At this moment, Yu Yan was focused on the crowd in front of her and didn't notice their move. When Su Ling saw that the 3 girls had successfully approached Yu Yan, she immediately picked up the scissors that had just been knocked down and rushed over to continue prying the lock. When Yu Yan discovered this, she turned around to stop her, but how could Su Ling's companions give her this chance? The few of them immediately surrounded Yu Yan. The creditors also wanted to know Yu Yan's debt repayment ability, so they naturally wouldn't go forward to stop them. Instead, they craned their necks and waited to see the outcome. There were still many people watching outside the door. At this moment, they kept squeezing in to see the situation up close. Yu Bing watched this scene in amusement. Compared to Yu Yan, who deliberately spread rumors about her to Madame Sun and secretly goaded her and her son into trying to rape her, ruining Yu Yan's reputation wasn't that big of a deal. 2 minutes later, Su Ling finally pried open the lock. After she opened the cabinet, she saw the small wooden box that Yu Yan usually treasured. The lock of the wooden box was very small and easy to pry open. After a while, Su Ling opened the wooden box and saw the stamps and letters inside. Su Ling's attention was on the stamps and she didn't check the letters. She took out the stamps excitedly and turned around to show them to everyone. Look! I knew there were stamps. Seeing this, Yu Yan stopped struggling and her face turned pale. Yu Bing went forward with a smile as she said calmly, Yu Yan, if you have any difficulties and don't want to sell stamps to repay the money, you should tell everyone. When Li Zhen saw the stamp Su Ling raised, he turned to look at Qian Hao and realized that he was looking at Yu Yan in disappointment and sadness. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 444 Fake Rich Lady. Li Zhen was straightforward and had a strong sense of justice to begin with. Now that his good friend looked like he had suffered a huge blow, he couldn't help but say angrily, Yu Yan, you're too much. Qian Hao lent you almost all the money he had on him. In the end, he didn't even have the money to treat his illness. What did you say at that time? You asked him to borrow money from the village committee. If you didn't have the money, I wouldn't have said anything, but you clearly do. Even 2 to 3 yuan for emergency treatment would have been fine, but you clearly don't care at all. When the other creditors saw this scene, they felt that they had been deceived and their expressions darkened. Su Ling flipped through the stamps in her hand and continued to add insult to injury with a smile. Yu Yan, if these are food stamps, I can understand that you're keeping these in order to fill your stomach, but these clothing stamps and cotton stamps. As far as I know, you have 2 winter clothes that haven't been patched. One of them is a new cotton shirt that your mother specifically sent over at the beginning of the year. There are also 2 slightly older ones. The cotton blanket you have is the softest and newest one I've ever seen. These stamps can be used to buy food, but you can't even bear to sell them to pay off your debts. I suspect that you don't really plan to pay back the money. Don't tell me you want to keep them until winter to make yourself a new cotton shirt? Now, the people who lent you money can barely afford to buy food. You're too outrageous. Su Ling looked indignant, as if she was a defender of justice. Yu Yan didn't lack clothes, but she couldn't tell them that her powerful and rich parents were not her biological parents and that she had to help her real family. No. The people in the dormitory building who usually curried favor with her would definitely laugh at her for pretending to be a rich girl. They wouldn't see how filial she was to her biological parents. They would only mock her and ostracize her if they couldn't get any more benefits from her. Moreover, Yu Yan couldn't tolerate her image of being from a well-off family being ruined, so she could only remain silent. Seeing this, everyone thought that Yu Yan had acquiesced to Su Ling's words, so everyone started discussing. At this point, mirth flashed across Yu Bing's eyes, but she quickly regained her calm expression. Qian Hao, Wen Sun, discuss a plan with Yu Yan. It's inappropriate to keep causing trouble, and it won't be good for our image if the villagers see this. Since everyone is here today, we might as well lay everything on the table. The intellectuals in the building had all gathered to watch the commotion, so Yu Bing's actions were no different from public execution to Yu Yan. Yu Yan knew that she was at a disadvantage now, so it was useless for her to say anything. However, she still wanted to protect her last bit of dignity. This is our private matter, so please leave. We want to discuss it in private. The 3 girls surrounding Yu Yan were already brooding over the fact that they couldn't get any benefits from Yu Yan. Yesterday, Yu Yan had fought with Su Ling, so they had to stand up for their friend. After the 3 of them exchanged looks, the girl with short student hair interrupted, "That won't do. Previously, they were deceived by you so many times. Who knows if you're telling the truth or not? They can't outweak you when it comes to scheming. We have to help them check. Don't you guys think so? Sometimes, intellectuals like drama as much as the nosy women in the village. After all, the villagers either worked in the fields or slept every day. Their days were really boring, so no one wanted to miss a single commotion. Moreover, this time, they were on the side of justice. Everyone became enthusiastic and immediately replied loudly. Yes, if you have anything to say, just say it. Who knows what tricks you're up to? That's right. They all returned empty-handed previously, so it's obvious that they're all honest people. Yu Yin, stop trying to play tricks in order to delay time. Hurry up. We still have to work later. Everyone here will be the judge. Don't just think about yourself. To you, that money is a small amount, but to others, it's their entire living expenses. You have to pay back the money. Come up with a repayment plan. Yu Yin was so angry that she was about to cry. She had never felt so embarrassed since she was young. Even when she was taken away by the police last time, she was taken away directly. She had never experienced being trapped in a room where everyone was looking at her with a condemning gaze. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 445 Ruining the environment. Of course, Yu Bing couldn't let Yu Yin have her way. Otherwise, the punishment would be too light. She had to make her remember this humiliation and ruin her reputation among the intellectuals. Yu Bing said solemnly, Yu Yin, if you had revealed the truth to the few boys who lent you money, things wouldn't have ended up like this. If we weren't here now, perhaps we wouldn't have been able to come up with a plan that both sides could accept in the end. If we couldn't, when would this matter end? Do you want to ruin the harmony amongst the intellectuals? The country had been summoning intellectuals to build the countryside for so many years. It wasn't that people had never borrowed money before, but the earliest batch of people knew that such an incident had never happened before. There would definitely be small conflicts, but no conflict over money had arisen in the youth dormitory building in the Yi Mountain village. The atmosphere had always been very good. Those who had been in the know for a long time looked at Yu Yin with even more hostility. Yu Yin was very indignant when she saw Yu Bing say that she was the culprit. However, she knew that if she protested now, she would only attract everyone's dissatisfaction. She lowered her eyes to hide her hatred for Yu Bing. When Yu Yin looked up again, she had an aggrieved look on her face as she looked at Qian Hao and the others with tears in her eyes. I'll get someone to sell those stamps in the next 2 days and distribute them to everyone according to the ratio of money everyone lent me. Although everyone could only get 1 to 2 yuan after she sold the stamps, which was less than half of the money they lent, it wasn't a problem if they used this money sparingly. If they didn't fall sick, it would be enough to last them a month. No matter what, it was better than nothing. A boy wearing black glasses asked, if your parents don't transfer money to you in the future, what about the rest of our money? Yu Yin had never thought that she would be without money one day, so when she heard the question, she was stumped. A boy with ill intentions interrupted, didn't you say that you have 4 cotton clothes? Sell 3 and keep 1. Yu Yin felt that the voice was a little familiar, so she looked in the direction of the voice. The other party was short and had shifty eyes. His petite figure made him look very wretched. Yu Yin recognized that the other party was a boy who had confessed to her a few times, but was rejected. Because of this, he often badmouthed her to the other young people. When the boy saw Yu Yin looking at him, a smug expression appeared in his eyes as he continued, the 2 clothes without patches are quite new. Those 3 clothes are definitely worth more than 10 yuan. Sell the remaining sweaters, pants, clothes without patches, porcelain basins, and so on. Moreover, most people were still very simple-minded these days. After all, they were not in the triads and loan sharks. They wouldn't force people into bankruptcy over a few yuan. Yu Bing rolled her eyes. A cornered dog would jump over a wall. A rabbit would bite when cornered. What a bad idea. The reason Yu Bing called it a bad idea was that everyone would feel a little embarrassed. In this era, they couldn't earn much money like in the future, so they had to save stamps and money for everything. Then, they would buy them one by one. Ordinary families could only save up for 1 new cotton shirt for their families after an entire year. Therefore, when Yu Yin heard this, her eyes turned red. I do owe money, but there's no need to force me into a dead end. Sure enough, some people began to whisper that this was a little too much. After the boys who lent money discussed it among themselves, someone stood up and said, Yu Yin, we don't need you to sell everything in order to pay back the money. If it's really too difficult, you can pay back some every month. As long as you work hard and the village pays the dividends at the end of the year, you should be able to pay it off in one go. When Yu Yin heard this, she gritted her teeth and remained silent. Previously, when she went to borrow money, the accountant Mr. Wei said that her work points were not even 50 yuan at the moment. Who knew what would happen at the end of the year? She didn't want to choose any option now. Yu Bing wouldn't let Yu Yan delay time. Thus, she stood up and exposed Yu Yan's ability to earn work points. The village said that Yu Yan borrowed 50 yuan previously. Because the amount was relatively large and Yu Yan often takes leave to slack off, her work points might not be able to be offsetted. We are not certain how much of everyone's dividends we can distribute to everyone before the end of the year, so we won't include the dividends at the end of the year. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 446 disappear. After cutting off Yu Yan's escape route, Yu Bing suggested, how about this? I'll give everyone a solution. Yu Yan, sell those stamps and 2 new cotton clothes. The earnings should add up to 20 to 30 yuan. In the next 2 months, if you receive money from your family, return it to everyone. If you don't, see how much you can get at the end of the year. If it's not enough, sell your leather shoes. This way, it shouldn't be a problem for you to return everyone's money. Everyone felt that this plan was good. Cotton clothes and leather shoes were all external items. Moreover, keeping 2 of the 4 cotton clothes was already better than many other people who only had 1 cotton shirt to resist the cold. Most of the people in the village ran around the fields all day long, so leather shoes were not useful for farm work at all. It was like expensive furnishing. If it really snowed, leather shoes wouldn't ward off the cold. Leather shoes just looked good. However, Yu Bing knew Yu Yan too well and knew that this plan would make her suffer the most. What Yu Yan cared about the most was her reputation and the feeling of being fawned over by everyone. Thus, Yu Bing would destroy what she cared about. In her previous life, Yu Bing and Yu Yan lived in the same dormitory. Yu Bing knew that Yu Yan usually only wore old cotton clothes when she went to the fields. Once Yu Yan returned to the dormitory, she immediately changed into new ones, even if Yu Yan only wore them for a few hours. There were few girls in the entire He Mountain village who had leather shoes, so this was something she could brag about. But now, the decision wasn't up to Yu Yan. The boys agreed. If the matter wasn't resolved, the onlookers wouldn't disperse. Yu Yan felt like an animal in a zoo at this moment. She didn't want to be laughed at again, so she could only quickly agree. Seeing that the matter had been resolved, everyone left in satisfaction. Before Su Ling left, she looked at Yu Yan and provoked, I don't dare to room with such a problematic person anymore. In the future, I'll stay in room 310. If anyone needs anything, look for me there. The veins on Yu Yan's temples throbbed as she looked at Su Ling with a murderous gaze, and she treated her as the second person she hated the most in the mountain village. The first person was naturally Yu Bing. Yan Yan didn't go far. Wanting to secretly find out what happened before thinking about his next step, he hid at the corner of the dormitory building. As he watched Yu Bing leave the dormitory building, Yan Yan felt a little regretful. He felt that he should have chosen Yu Bing back then. How could he have made a decision so quickly? However, the temptation of returning to the city was still very great. Yan Yan chose to wait patiently to see if there was anything wrong with Yu Yan's parents' jobs. Once it was confirmed that their positions were affected, he would mention breaking up. He couldn't let his bright future be ruined. Because of this embarrassing incident, Yu Yan kept a low profile in the next few months and became even more sinister. The money Yu Yan owed was paid off in October because she finally got into contact with her adoptive parents. Her adoptive parents also explained the reason for her disappearance. It was because her adoptive brother, Yu Shi, was seriously injured during a secret assignment. The leader of the army specifically took the entire family away to take care of the injured. Yu Shi was treated more than 10 times over 2 months before finally surviving. This was a matter of life and death. Li Xian wasn't in good health and had fainted twice. Under such circumstances, she naturally didn't contact Yu Yan. There was another reason. They wanted to save money for Yu Yan so that she would be able to eat meat every week. Thus, they placed their attention on Yu Shi, who was in an even more critical situation. Who would have thought that not only did Yu Yan not have money at that time, but in order to return to Hang City, she also owed a lot of money and was waiting for them to send money to save her. Because they had not transferred money to Yu Yan for 2 to 3 months, Yu Hai and Li Xian felt that they had mistreated their daughter. Therefore, when Yu Yan asked for 50 yuan, the two of them sent it over without asking. However, to Yu Yan, no matter what her adoptive parents did now, the resentment in her heart wouldn't decrease because of their explanation. Instead, she was even more certain that her adoptive parents didn't treat her as their biological child. However, after this incident, Yu Yan realized that she couldn't lose contact with her adoptive parents, so she suppressed her dissatisfaction and pretended to be concerned about her adoptive brother's injuries. After knowing that he was already recovering, she felt a little disappointed. In the past, Yu Yan felt that having an adoptive brother was quite good because she wouldn't be bullied. But now, she felt that it would be good if her adoptive brother disappeared. This way, her adoptive parents could only give her all their attention. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 447 quiet times. After Yu Yin kept a low profile, Yu Bing enjoyed a rare period of peace. In the past few months, Wu Jin was mainly in charge of the orchard, fish pond, and farm. Yu Bing was in charge of the processing and sales. The harvest began in October, so the orchard was quite busy. Everything was happening all together. The pear tree, kiwi tree, and persimmon tree all began to ripen this month, so the workers in the orchard worked overtime to pick them. Wu Jin went in to preside over the harvesting work in the field, while Yu Bing took half a day every day to go to the orchard to see the harvesting progress. Because the kiwis were resistant to transportation, they were still very stiff when they were plucked. There was still some time before the fruit became soft and ripe, so Yu Bing arranged for someone to bring them to another province to sell. The persimmons were processed into persimmon pancakes and sold by Yu Bing in bags. The pears were made into canned fruits. Persimmons and pears belonged to the north. After processing the finished products, Yu Bing and Wu Jin obtained the transportation approval slip and asked Shaoxing's transport team to sell them in the nearest southern city. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the year. At Shaoxing's house. At night, it was study time once again. Shaoxing was now working in the food factory. On the surface, he was already a worker. With this as a cover, his family occasionally ate meat openly. Yu Bing saw that Xiaoli and Xiaolin were struggling to survive under Shaoxing's awful cooking and couldn't bear to see them suffer, so every time she bought meat, she would buy more. Then, she would send a bowl of veggies to the Xiao family every few days to improve their quality of food. After a while, Shaoxing simply bought some meat and placed them at Yu Bing's house. He asked Yu Bing and Jiang Chun to help his family cook twice a week every time they cooked as compensation. The two families were already so familiar with each other, so Yu Bing and Jiang Chun didn't refuse. However, they would send back some of the other veggies they made every time. After more than half a year, Xiaolin and Xiaoli had grown a lot taller. There was finally some flesh on their faces, and they were no longer as scrawny as before. It was snowing outside and two braziers were placed in the living room on the left and right, warming up the room. Every time Yu Bing came to the Xiao family's house, she would first give Xiaoli a lesson before teaching Xiaolin. At this moment, Xiaolin and Xiaoli were sitting beside the brazier. Ever since Xiaolin became Xiaoli's teacher, his grades had indeed improved greatly. In order to not make any mistakes in class for Xiaoli at night, he even started paying more attention in class. Yu Bing and Shaoxing sat at the table. Yu Bing looked at the snow as she marveled, time passes so quickly. I've been in Yi Mountain Village for a year and a half now. Shaoxing felt a little emotional when he heard this. Last year, he was only Yu Bing's business partner, but this year, he had become her boyfriend. Shaoxing chuckled when he thought of this. Yu Bing turned around curiously and asked, "What are you laughing at?" The smile on Shaoxing's face was very gentle as he asked, "Do you still remember the scene of us meeting on the back mountain?" Yu Bing thought about it and laughed. "Of course I remember. Your gaze almost scared me to death. At that time, I really felt that you wanted to kill me to silence me." Shaoxing smiled and said, "At that time, I felt so unlucky. I hadn't been seen for so many years, but you saw me. Moreover, you were an intellectual from the city. We weren't familiar with each other, so I thought you might report me. At that time, I was prepared for the worst. But after that, I was glad that we met that time." After Shaoxing finished speaking, he looked at Yu Bing fixedly. As Yu Bing stared back at him, she felt that Shaoxing's usually cold eyes when he looked at others were filled with tenderness. He was smiling and his eyes were shining like the starry sky, mesmerizing Yu Bing. "Ha ha ha, brother, your deskmate is so funny." "That's right. The next time he does something stupid, I'll remember and tell you when I come back." The two of them, who were immersed in each other's gazes, were interrupted by the chatter beside them. When they came back to their senses, they felt their faces heat up and their gazes drifted elsewhere. However, they couldn't help but smile. When Yu Bing thought of the one-year promise she had set, she hurriedly warned herself not to be mesmerized by his good looks and to hold on for the test. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 448 Geography question. Yu Bing suppressed her flustered emotions and changed the topic. "I heard from Xiaolin just now that there's only one person left in front of Xiaoli, right?" Shaoxing smiled excitedly and said, "That's right. Perhaps she can have surgery next year." After Yu Bing confirmed that the news was true, she smiled brightly. "The opportunity is very close. As long as we save enough money and persist in massaging Xiaoli's eyes, the success rate of the surgery will be very high. By the way, remember to inform me when you go to S City." Shaoxing knew how concerned Yu Bing was about Xiaoli's eyes, so he nodded with a smile. "Okay." The two of them chatted for a while before starting class. Yu Bing had already gone through all the textbooks from her 3 years of high school. Now, she was mainly reviewing and doing questions to consolidate her knowledge. Xiaoxing's current learning progress only reached the second year of high school. Yu Bing's plan for Xiaoxing was to finish all the high school textbooks by February of next year. Yu Bing checked Xiaoxing's practice books for all the subjects last week. The completion rate was very good, and the accuracy was about 98%. She was stunned when she realized that there was a large blank under the geographical exercise question she had carefully chosen. She didn't say anything and only frowned at Xiaoxing. Xiaoxing explained diffidently, "This question is too difficult." Then, in order to prove his point, Xiaoxing pointed at the question he had left blank and said, "Look at this question. The police look at the North Star and then bring people into the criminal den. What is the first sentence the criminal is most likely to say? I really don't understand how the two are related." The 4 answers to this question were in the dialect of 4 places. The question was actually asking the police where they were at this moment. Then, Xiaoxing pointed at another blank question. "Look at this again. Why does everyone say the northwest wind instead of the southeast wind? Isn't this just an idiom? How can there be so many whys? Why are there so many songs in the southwest region of our country? This should be a history question. Is it appropriate to put it in the geography question section?" Yu Bing chuckled as she looked at these questions. Back then, she had chosen this book from the waste station because some of the questions were flexible and had the questioning style of that of the future. She could use them as inferences. However, Yu Bing didn't expect Xiaoxing to be ignorant about so many things. She remembered that Xiaoxing was quite good at every subject, so she wanted him to challenge himself. As Xiaoxing looked down at the questions, he seemed a little vexed. After Yu Bing thought for a moment, she replied seriously, "I'll try my best to come over every night to explain these special questions to you. Try your best to catch up on high school geography before the spring festival." A hint of joy flashed across Xiaoxing's eyes, but he pursed his lips tightly to prevent himself from smiling. It had been almost half a year since the test started, but he had not even gotten half of the points. Xiaoxing was a little anxious. However, Yu Bing had been too busy some time ago, and the two of them were busy with their own things, so Xiaoxing was anxious but helpless. When he received this geography exercise book and saw this strange question, Xiaoxing was indeed a little stumped. However, he was still able to write the correct answer after careful analysis. However, Xiaoxing thought of how much Yu Bing valued his learning progress, so he thought of this method to increase the time the two of them spent together. This reason was above board and was the least like to arouse Yu Bing's suspicion. At this moment, Yu Bing still didn't know and was still feeling smug that Xiaoxing didn't have to worry about other subjects. She thought that the two of them would definitely be able to get into the capital school together in the future. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Xiaoxing sent Yu Bing home. Then, the two of them chatted at the door for a while. In the room, Jiang Chun was reading the letter Cui Jin had sent. After reading it, she covered her face with her hands and laughed. After Yu Bing entered, she saw Jiang Chun smiling foolishly. Yu Bing had an idea and she tiptoed behind Jiang Chun. Only then did she realize that there was an unopened math book on the table in front of her and a few pieces of paper beside it. Yu Bing whispered into Jiang Chun's ear mischievously, "No wonder you're smiling so brightly." Jiang Chun was originally alone at home, so when she heard Yu Bing's words, she was startled. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 449 Proposal. She quickly patted her chest a few times, then she patted Yu Bing's arm and said, "Do you want to die? You scared me to death." Yu Bing teased, "It's your fault for being so engrossed that you didn't even notice when I came in, but that's normal. Every time you see Cui Jin's letter, you enter a trance." Jiang Chun rolled her eyes at Yu Bing. When she thought of the contents of the letter, she didn't know how to decide. She originally wanted to reply immediately after reading the letter so that she could study. Unexpectedly, the night passed, but she still hadn't decided. At this moment, looking at Yu Bing, who was drinking water, she hesitated about whether to ask her. From the corner of her eye, Yu Bing saw Jiang Chun's hesitant expression and she teased, "If you have something to say, say it. When did you become so indecisive?" Jiang Chun pursed her lips and said in embarrassment, "Cui Jin mentioned marriage to me in the letter." Yu Bing asked in surprise, "He proposed to you?" When Jiang Chun heard this word, she asked curiously, "Propose?" Yu Bing suddenly remembered that there was no such saying in the country yet. Now, if the man wanted to get married, he would ask directly. If the woman agreed, they would get married. If she didn't, they would interact with each other some time longer. There was no such thing as a marriage proposal. After the country opened up and the world resumed trade, the people in the country learned the term from abroad. Yu Bing immediately changed her words and explained, "It means he wants to marry you." Jiang Chun smiled when she heard Yu Bing's words. "He wants to get married, but I haven't decided on it yet." Yu Bing nodded in understanding. Marriage is a big deal, so it's normal to hesitate about marriage. What are you thinking now? Jiang Chun lowered her eyes and thought for a while before replying. We communicate almost every week. Although we don't really spend much time together, I think we already know each other very well through letters. Be it our values or opinions on many things, we are very similar. I can also sense our fondness for each other. Moreover, we've been dating for half a year, so it seems quite appropriate to get married now. Speaking of marriage and relationships, Yu Bing felt that she had only experienced failures so far, and couldn't give Jiang Chun too many good suggestions, so she could only think of some future television dramas and novels as references. Think about what his shortcomings are and what you can't tolerate the most. Then, think about it. If he can't change these things for the rest of his life, will you be able to tolerate him for the rest of your life and not bring them up when you guys fight? Sometimes, when Cui Jin was on an assignment and couldn't write to her, he would suddenly go AWOL. This was indeed very concerning to her. However, she also knew that this was because of Cui Jin's profession. After all, there were some things that someone had to do. In addition, Jiang Chun had already overcome this problem in the early stages of her relationship. As for the rest, Jiang Chun really couldn't think of anything else. I can't think of anything. What I care about the most is probably the way husband and wife interact during the marriage. Actually, there will be times when we have differences of opinion, but no matter how fierce the argument is, he will give in when I give in. Then we can find a compromise. I've always felt comfortable with this way of interacting. At the thought of this, Jiang Chun smiled sweetly. I know that there are always all kinds of conflicts when two people are together, but every conflict seems to bring us closer to each other. He even said that he's preparing to transfer to a new military district, which will only be built a year later. At that time, he'll apply to let me follow the army. Yu Bing didn't expect Cui Jin to have already considered Jiang Chun in his future plans and treat Jiang Chun as such an important part of his future. This improved Yu Bing's impression of Jiang Chun's future marriage. Hearing Jiang Chun's description, she smiled and said, "Actually, you already have an answer." Jiang Chun was stunned when she heard this, but then she quickly understood what Yu Bing meant. They had common topics, and there were no unacceptable shortcomings. When conflicts arose, they could be easily resolved. She and Cui Jin also looked forward to developing this relationship to the next level. Jiang Chun took out a blank letter without hesitation and began to reply. Seeing this, Yu Bing didn't disturb her anymore and quietly went to make the bed. Perhaps it was because of Jiang Chun's influence, but after Yu Bing turned off the kerosene lamp and went to bed at night, she fell into deep thought as she looked at the moonlight shining in from the window. She and Xiaoxing met often, but the two of them had never quarreled. There didn't seem to be any conflicts between them. At most, one side would get angry, but then get appeased by the other party very quickly. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 450 interacting period. The two of them had to interact for a period of time, but were they getting along? She didn't know if it was because she liked his handsome face or if she was very touched that Xiaoxing would appear to save her every time she was in danger, but was this love? For the first time, Yu Bing felt a little confused about her feelings. She and Xiaoxing seemed to be completely different from Jiang Chun and her boyfriend. Amidst such conflicted and confused emotions, Yu Bing fell asleep. Early the next morning, the snow began to fall even more heavily. When Yu Bing stepped on the snow reached her ankles. It was farm time in the village again. Other than the factory, which was still operating normally, the work in the field had already been put on hold, and people watched over the orchard according to the shift schedule. This year, they no longer needed to ask for the earthworms from other people's fish ponds, and that saved them another sum of money. When the fish pond dried last month, they let the children in the village go down to catch earthworms together. They could get work points and play with mud at the same time, so all of them were overjoyed. When the weather turned cold last month, all the fish had already been fished out. The chickens and ducks on the farm would become the contents of the New Year gift box released by the food factory. After collecting the eggs every month, they identified the fertilized eggs and continued to hatch them. The rest were directly transferred to the food factory to produce ingredients. This method reduced costs greatly. Yu Bing had secretly smoked them on the mountain last year, but this year, she no longer had to do the labor herself. In order to develop the factory better, she contributed the formula to the factory. As long as the order came from Xiaoxing, she could get dividends. As Yu Bing thought of next month's bonuses, she laughed to herself. This time, the fish pond harvested more than 13,000 caddies of fish, and they were all made into canned spicy fish according to the weight of 500 grams per bottle. Because there was a drying and frying process, which reduced the water inside, only 12,852 bottles were made. There were 3,000 chickens and ducks each. Yu Bing asked the factory to make smoked meat because the welfare products distributed by the factory were based on the price. However, the price of a whole chicken and duck wasn't cheap, so they were sold by half, which was equivalent to 6,000 bags of cured chicken and 6,000 bags of cured duck in total. This was still an era where supplies were scarce and everyone ate meat sparingly, so this amount was actually just right. Although there were only half, it could last a family of 5 or 6 for 2 to 3 months if they cut a small piece and ate it with stir-fried other vegetables every meal. The food factory had been developing new products. In the past few months, Yu Bing had judged whether it was worth continuing to produce based on sales, so she had been adjusting the amount and variety of food. At the end of the year, the number of food types still being sold reached 16. Yu Bing's strategy of setting up an image shop was very successful. The delicious food factory had already successfully made a name for itself in Jiang province. Due to the increase in orders, the food factory had recruited another batch of workers in the past few months. There were already 65 workers in the factory, and the business personnel outside the factory had also become 3 people per shop. There were 1 manager and 2 employees, totaling about 100 people in all the shops. The debts owed last year and the beginning of the year were also paid off in advance, so the village's industrial chain was booming. On the 10th of February, according to the production progress decided by Yu Bing, all the production in the factory had to be completed by January 20th. The annual leave would start on the 21st. It was less than a month away, so the factory was working overtime to produce. Jiang Chun was the person in charge of the production department. She went out early every morning and only returned when the sky was completely dark. She was even busier than Yu Bing. It was also because the various departments in the factory had already formed regulations that Yu Bing relaxed a little after she was done busying some time ago. Now, Yu Bing was in charge of cooking 3 meals and chores at home. After breakfast, Yu Bing left the house in her old cotton jacket and gray scarf. A few women from the village walked over. When they saw Yu Bing walking on the road, they immediately took the initiative to greet her. "Miss Yu, you're going to work?" Yu Bing saw that the women looked a little familiar. Although she couldn't name them, she still smiled and replied, "Yes, you guys are going out? There's not much work to do now, so we're going to town. We're bored out of our minds. Miss Yu, I'm studying hard during the night classes now. Next time I apply for a job, pay more attention to me." Me too, me too. I didn't dare to miss a single lesson. As the few of them chatted nonstop, Yu Bing smiled helplessly and said, "As long as you guys attend class diligently, there will be a chance when the factory expands." Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.